five worrying signs that Israel and Iran are on the path to a direct war. Now, in this report, they gave five signs that there is a war about to happen between Israel and Iran. The first one is fuel shipments and materials to Iran. According to this report, Iran has been escalating and increasing its use of shipments coming into Iran for the use of missiles, for example, or anything to do with their defensive strategies against any potential attacks. And Iran has been ramping up its efforts to make sure that it can defend itself in any potential attack coming from Israel, potentially with the assistance of the United States. I mean, some arguments say that Israel wouldn't be able to carry out any operation against Iran unless it's with the support of the United States, even if the United States wouldn't be participating directly or declaring such participation. This is something that Iran is probably aware of because Iran released a warning to all of the countries neighboring it that have United States bases inside them that they will be attacked in case Israel attacks Iran, even if they weren't used or did not declare that they are being used for this attack against Iran. The second reason in this report, they said that Israel is ready to attack. Israel is ready to attack, and Benjamin Netanyahu constantly emphasizes and states that Iran is the main cause of all of these problems. Iran is behind the 7th of October. They armed the Palestinian resistance. Iran was behind all of the attacks that were coming from Lebanon. Iran is behind Ansarullah in Yemen, all of the attacks that were carried out against Israel since the 7th of October. The third reason is they're saying that Iran-linked militias enter the picture. And according to this claim here, the missiles that came from Syria a few days back from the Dir'a province, Iran is behind them. This is not substantiated. There is no proof of that. As a matter of fact, the whole report was quite ambiguous. But according to that report, the Iranian militias or Iranian armed groups are already prepared for such an escalation. Although, if Iran would go into an all-out war with Israel, for example, the biggest armed group that is backed by Iran is Hezbollah in Lebanon. And Hezbollah in Lebanon are still at a phase where they're giving the state an option to reach all of these agreements with France, the United States, and the mediators to force Israel to withdraw before they resume any potential operations against Israel, although Israel is constantly attacking Lebanon. The fourth reason in this report is one of the most important reasons that they have described. That's something that I've been talking about for the past several weeks, which is Benjamin Netanyahu's political situation. Benjamin Netanyahu is struggling heavily internally, and now he's facing his biggest crisis with members of his coalition deciding and confirming that they will be voting for a motion to dissolve the Israeli Knesset that was proposed by the Israeli opposition. That means Benjamin Netanyahu is stuck, and he is in a situation where his government could be facing collapse. If Benjamin Netanyahu's government collapses, if the coalition collapses, that means there would be early elections. If there are early elections in Israel, that means Benjamin Netanyahu will not be winning the elections, at least according to all of the recent polls that have been published in Israel, especially after the 7th of October moving forward, and after all of the Benjamin Netanyahu attempts to hinder and not go ahead with any ceasefire agreements. This is causing more and more trouble internally, at a political level, societal level, and at a military level as well. And the fifth reason, according to this report, is the isolation of Israel globally. Now you have European countries threatening with sanctions, more moves against Israel at the global scene. The United States administration, led by Donald Trump, taking certain measures that are not in the favor of Israel. Donald Trump himself not visiting Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel in his recent visit to the Middle East. Senior figures, including the Secretary of Defense and the top aides of Donald Trump, canceling visits that were planned to Israel, and also Donald Trump sacking certain figures that are considered to be pro Israeli in his government, and Iran hawks, as they describe them, who constantly want to push for a war against Iran. These are the reasons that this report is given, that is saying that they are the main reasons that Israel would be carrying out an attack against Iran. Moving on to the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about, in the past several weeks, the Palestinian resistance has been carrying out attacks against the Israeli terror forces inside of the Gaza Strip at a different level, at a different magnitude, consistency, intelligence, and it's not stopping, it's not fading away. Israel is still committing barbaric acts inside of the Gaza Strip today. At least 62 people were martyred in attacks against civilian locations, civilian buildings, and places where Israel told the civilians to flee to, where they would be safe. Israel attacked them again and again. Yet, despite all of that, the Palestinian resistance is still conducting very intense operations against the genocide forces in Gaza. And the recent one was this attack here, Al Qassam Brigades blowing up a tunnel with a Zionist force of 6 soldiers in the southern part of Gaza Strip. They took down a tunnel opening, most likely intended to lure the terror forces of Israel into, and they exploded the whole thing. Again, the Palestinian resistance confirmed that there were 6 there. Israel did not declare how many of them were killed, but Israel confirmed that altogether in the past 24 hours, at least 6 Israelis were killed in multiple operations inside of the Gaza Strip. This wasn't the only one. There was another attack in the area of Khan Yunis with an action being taken by Sarai Al-Quds Brigade is the armed wing of the PIJ, and another missile attack being carried out by Al-Mujahideen group against the Israeli terror forces inside of Jabalia. So we're talking about multiple resistance armed groups taking action, more of the smaller groups getting back into the picture again against Israel in Gaza. And Benjamin Netanyahu is finding it more and more difficult now to sell the idea that they would be able to have a decisive attack or a decisive war or genocide against the Palestinians and the Palestinian resistance. This is coming after weeks of attacks that are constantly escalating, coming from the Palestinian resistance. Another very important thing happened today. Abu Ubaidah issued a warning to Israeli forces that they are besieging a captive site. This is something that the Palestinian resistance does not usually do. However, Abu Ubaidah came in a statement that he's making the second day in a row after we haven't heard from him in a while. And today he said that there is an Israeli prisoner of war, specifically Matan Tsengauker, the son of Einav Tsengauker, who is leading the battle, leading a fierce battle against Benjamin Netanyahu, protesting against him to reach a deal. This woman has been protesting alongside hundreds of thousands of Israelis ever since the beginning of the genocide, criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu and asking him to reach a deal, because any delay would be killing more Israelis. And indeed, over 40 Israelis have been killed by Israel since the beginning of the genocide, and that's becoming more mainstream now in Israel. Everyone knows about it, even mainstream media. They're talking about it as if it's normal. They know that Israel carried out and still does carry out operations against the kidnapped inside of the Gaza Strip. Now, in the case of Matan Tsengauker, this is a similar case to Aidan Alexander. Aidan Alexander, the American Israeli who was in the Israeli army that the Palestinian resistance released as a gesture for Donald Trump, Israel tried to kill him. He confirmed that. The Palestinian resistance said that Israel targeted the location and they lost communication with some of his guards. At the time, the Palestinian resistance did not declare if he was still alive or not. But later on, clearly, he was still alive. Israel tried to kill him at the time to hinder the deal that was about to happen between Hamas and the United States administration directly. Why? because Benjamin Netanyahu did not want the Americans to speak with the Palestinians directly. And the Americans were speaking with the Palestinians directly anyway, because they had no more faith in the mediators coming from Israel, and they weren't convinced that Benjamin Netanyahu and his delegation are indeed negotiating for the sake of reaching an agreement and finally getting to a ceasefire. In the case of Matan Tsengauker, his mother is leading the campaign. His mother is one of the fiercest people protesting against Benjamin Netanyahu, and she has been constantly calling for the ending of the war. And she was protesting as well today in Israel, with more criticism coming against Benjamin Netanyahu. And as a matter of fact, she was saying that Benjamin Netanyahu is actually an angel of death. So there were massive protests in Israel after this report coming from the Palestinian resistance. And Einaf Tsengauker, the mother of Matan Tsengauker, said that Benjamin Netanyahu, he's an angel of death. He is killing the people deliberately. And she was mentioning how Benjamin Netanyahu is constantly leading to the killing of more Israeli prisoners of war. She said today, Hamas announced that my Matan is in mortal danger. The military pressure is closing in on him and is placing him in immediate danger. The decision to expand the ground maneuver is at the cost of Matan's life and all of the kidnapped men and women. Netanyahu, the angel of death, continues to sacrifice the hostages. He uses the Israeli Defense Forces not to protect Israel's security, but to continue the war and protect his government. I fear for Matan's physical and mental condition. I fear for his condition. It will deteriorate and that he will not be able to escape again if the place where he's being held is shelled. She turned to the prime minister saying, Netanyahu, if my Matan does not return alive, his blood will be in your hands. Again, blaming Benjamin Netanyahu directly of trying to kill her son outright. And she's leading the protests against Benjamin Netanyahu on behalf, of course, of the Israeli prisoners of war. Now, the Palestinian resistance, they did not declare where he is being held. They said Israel is besieging a location where an Israeli prisoner of war is. That causes a problem. That causes a very big problem. What's that problem? Well, the IDF terrorists in Gaza will understand that this is happening. They will know that, well, Hamas said that we are close to him and that he will not be found alive. Basically, the Palestinian resistance said, if you reach him, you will not be taking him alive. The IDF, they wouldn't have an option but to be on more high alert. They would have to potentially take different measures, or they would need to go in full force and risk themselves and him in the operation. And if they do continue, this will show to everyone, not just to the Israeli public, that the Palestinian resistance was right in warning them that he will be killed if they continue the operation. So no one would have an excuse against the Palestinian resistance. They already told the Israeli terror forces, if you try and take any of these prisoners of war, they will be killed and you will be killed with them in case you try and take them. And that happened, that tone coming from the Palestinian resistance, by the way, it escalated after Israel took 2 live Israeli prisoners of war after killing 400 Palestinians at the time, massive bombardment, and killed 3 Israelis in the process to rescue 2. The Palestinian resistance at the time, they told them the conditions will be harsher and you will not get to anyone alive. Because some of the prisoners of war who are held in Gaza, it's not like all of them were in tunnels. Some people were in houses. Some of the Israeli prisoners of war were in houses in Gaza. They weren't like under the ground all of the time, because the Palestinian resistance tried to, give them at least some sort of normality. Now, this is escalating. It's causing the IDF to be on high alert, and it's going to cause big trouble for Benjamin Netanyahu if he decides to press ahead and continue with this operation, and it would cause a big problem for the Israeli army too. Now, in the case of the Israeli army, the prisoners of war's families in Israel, they're directly now also addressing the IDF chief of staff, Eyal Zamir. And what they're telling him is an argument that is a legal argument in Israel, which is you cannot accept an order if that order puts an Israeli's life at risk. So the notion here is that the IDF chief of staff is bound by or reports to the defense minister, who reports to the Israeli prime minister. So ultimately, the decision is in the hands of the Israeli prime minister. And if the Israeli prime minister makes any decision, the IDF chief of staff has to follow orders of the political level. Benjamin Netanyahu, in the past year and a half, he also tried to extend his powers to make certain moves that are supposed to go through the IDF chief of staff initially by directly having certain elements within the Israeli army who are reporting directly to Benjamin Netanyahu. So, skipping the IDF chief of staff, and at one point he had a row with the IDF chief of staff because he was getting this information without the approval of the IDF chief of staff, because any report that goes to the Israeli prime minister, it has to go through multiple layers in the chain of command in the Israeli army. And Benjamin Netanyahu was recruiting people inside of the IDF to report to him directly. Why? So he can use the information that is given for his own benefit, even if the IDF chief of staff does not really think that it's relevant to be passed for the Israeli prime minister. Now, from the perspective of the families of the prisoners of war, and of course others in Israel, Netanyahu is giving orders that are killing Israelis. Now it's all across Israeli mainstream media and some international media too, that the attacks that are being carried out by the Israeli terror forces in Gaza are killing prisoners of war. Over 40 are killed, for between 40 to 50, the numbers vary. And everyone knows that it's Israel killing them. And the Palestinian resistance has been releasing information to prove that all of this is happening because of the attacks of Israel. And now they're telling the IDF chief of staff, you can't follow the orders if you are putting the lives of these people at risk. However, the Israeli IDF chief of staff, he hasn't shown anything that indicates that he's going to go against any orders coming from Benjamin Netanyahu. There were circumstances where he had different priorities of the war. For example, when he said the first priority is to return the prisoners of war and then achieve victory over Hamas, whereas Benjamin Netanyahu constantly states that the ultimate goal of the war is to destroy the Hamas and achieve victory and return the prisoners of war.